What happens when the man who signs your paycheck scrubs your toilets and you don't even know it? Mason Vellaro had built his life on fixing broken things. 10 years ago, he bought a struggling chain of 6 beachside resorts scattered along the Gulf Coast, each one clinging to survival, bleeding money, and held together by duct tape and luck. He turned them around with grit and smart hiring. But now, sitting in his office on the 10th floor of the downtown tower, he felt a knot in his gut. He hadn't stepped foot in any of the locations in over a year. His district managers kept reporting that things were running smooth, but the reviews online told a different story. At one resort in particular, the Clearwater Bay location, guests were complaining about dirty rooms, unfriendly service, and long check-in waits. One review mentioned a housekeeper crying in the hallway. Instead of sending someone, Mason decided to go himself. He shaved the beard he'd had for 8 years, swapped his tailored suits for faded jeans and resort-issued khakis, and threw on a pair of thick-rimmed glasses that made him look 10 years younger and 10 pounds lighter. Nobody at Clearwater Bay had ever met him. He'd only dealt with the manager over video calls. It was a big enough chain that most employees wouldn't even know what he looked like. He applied under the name Jay Moreno, claiming to be a college dropout from Houston, just looking for steady work. He got hired instantly. The cleaning crew was short-staffed and had been for months. The HR girl, nervous and overwhelmed, explained that people kept quitting because the schedule was demanding. Day 1 started at 6:30 in the morning. "Jay, this is your cart. Don't lose it. Brenda will walk you through the rooms," said a woman who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Brenda Kessler was in her early 30s, with dull brown eyes and a voice so hoarse Mason thought she had a cold. "That's 16 rooms today," she muttered. "You get 15 minutes per room. Don't talk to guests. Don't use your phone. And don't ask for breaks. We don't have time." "No breaks." Mason blinked. Brenda didn't even look up. "You can eat while pushing your cart. If you're lucky." They worked the first floor first, then the third, then the second because the elevators were down. Brenda didn't complain, but her limp told Mason she was hurting. She moved like someone used to swallowing pain. By 10 a.m., Mason's back was sore. By noon, he was drenched in sweat and missed 3 calls from his actual assistant. Brenda never stopped. At one point, a younger woman named Tasha bumped into Mason in the hallway. "You must be new," she said, eyes scanning his cart. "Brenda tell you about the no-break rule?" "Yeah," Mason said, trying to keep it casual. "That normal here?" Tasha glanced around, lowered her voice. "Yeah. Sarah, our supervisor, says breaks are for lazy people. Last girl that asked to sit for 10 minutes got her schedule cut for attitude. She quit a week later." Mason felt his jaw tighten. "That even legal?" Tasha gave a tired laugh. "Sarah doesn't care. She says if we don't like it, we can leave. And people do." At lunch, Mason tried to sit for 5 minutes in the staff lounge. Brenda walked in and froze. "You sitting?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I was just, don't. If Sarah sees, we both get chewed out. Just eat while folding towels. Come on." Mason stood, heart pounding. He followed her back to the laundry room, hands shaking more from anger than exhaustion. He watched Brenda scarf down a protein bar while folding sheets with robotic speed. By the time the shift ended at 7, Mason had cleaned 19 rooms, missed every single break, and felt like he'd been hit by a truck. As they clocked out, he asked Brenda, "How long you been here?" 2 years, she said, pulling her hoodie on. "Single mom. Can't afford to quit. You ever ask for a break?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Once. Sarah told me if I can't handle it, I should go flip burgers instead." Mason stared at her. "That's messed up." Brenda shrugged. "It's just how it is." He didn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Brenda limping down that hallway, folding towels with trembling hands, still getting it done. still showing up, and nobody cared. But he did. And by the end of the week, someone was going to care a whole lot more. By the third day, Mason no longer felt like a guest in someone else's operation. He was knee-deep in it, the sour smell of mildew in the service elevator, the stiff towels that felt like sandpaper, the unspoken rules that hung heavy in the air like heat. This wasn't just a staffing issue. It was a leadership collapse. And it had a name. Sarah Klein. She was the housekeeping supervisor at Clearwater Bay. In her early 40s, with tightly pulled hair and a clipped tone, she ran her floor like it was boot camp. Except soldiers got breaks. Mason had only seen her twice on his first day, but now that he blended in, she was around more often. Not helping, not cleaning, just watching, clipboard in hand, correcting people harshly over small things like pillow placement or towel fold angles. That morning, Brenda had been reassigned to another wing. Mason got placed with a new partner, Hector, a quiet older man who moved slowly but worked with care. His hands were cracked and stained from years of chemical exposure. Hector didn't talk much, but when he did, he chose his words precisely. "She doesn't like when people move slow," Hector said while straightening the bed corners. "Who? Sarah?" He nodded once. "She says if we're not fast, we're replaceable." Mason watched him tug at the fitted sheet, knuckles trembling from some kind of tremor. "You ever say anything to HR?" "I did. Once. Got moved to night shift for 2 weeks. Said they were rebalancing schedules." Hector's mouth pressed into a line. "I got the message." Mason didn't respond. He couldn't. Not yet. By mid-morning, it was clear the second floor had been neglected. The carpets were stained, the air thick with an odd dampness. Room 212 had a busted door lock that took Mason 3 tries to open. Inside, the sink was backed up and the bathroom light flickered. Hector sighed. "We're supposed to report maintenance, but they take days to fix anything." "Why?" "Because we don't have overnight maintenance anymore. Budget cut. So they rotate from other properties every 3 days." Mason stopped wiping the mirror. "You're telling me if a guest has no hot water tonight, they have to wait until Friday?" "If it's not an emergency, yes." "And what qualifies as an emergency?" Hector looked at him. "Flooding. Fire. A dead body." Mason leaned against the counter. "Jesus." At lunch, they didn't sit. They stood behind the laundry room door, eating quietly out of Tupperware containers. Sarah walked in unexpectedly and narrowed her eyes at Hector's sandwich. "You got time to eat, you got time to fold," she said, not even raising her voice. Mason watched Hector chew twice, then put his food away without a word. Sarah turned to Mason. "You. What's your name again?" "Jay." "You're slow." "I'm learning." She stared at him. "You don't get a learning curve here. You get a standard. Pick it up tomorrow or I'll cut your shifts in half." She turned and walked out, heels clicking against the tile. Mason's jaw clenched. She always talked to people like that? Hector didn't answer. He just picked up a stack of sheets and kept folding. That night, Mason sat at the edge of his bed in the cheap employee housing unit 2 blocks from the resort. He opened his laptop, logged into the back end of the resort's HR system access he still had as CEO, and pulled Sarah's personnel file. 3 written complaints in the last 7 months. 2 verbal warnings. 1 employee resignation citing hostile management behavior. But no final action. The regional director had marked each incident as resolved through coaching. Mason closed the file, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. He'd hired that regional director himself. Promoted him 5 years ago after a stellar quarter. Now he was rubber stamping abuse. The next morning, Brenda returned to his wing. Her limp was worse. "You all right?" Mason asked, keeping his voice low. "Twisted my ankle yesterday," told Sarah. "She said to wrap it and keep moving." "You serious?" "She said if I call out, I lose hours next week. Mason swallowed hard. Did you document that? She gave him a look. To who? HR? They won't back me up. They started on the 3rd floor. Room 305 had towels in the toilet and mold in the shower tile. The guest had already checked out, but Brenda still moved quickly, her wrapped ankle slowing her just enough to draw Sarah's attention when she came through for inspection. What's the delay here? Sarah demanded. Brenda straightened. The room was worse than expected. Sarah's gaze dropped to the ankle wrap. Then maybe you shouldn't have shown up at all. I didn't want to lose hours. Then work faster. You're not here to coast. Mason stepped forward. She's injured. You can't just ignore that. Sarah turned to him. You're new. Don't get involved in things you don't understand. I understand labor law, Mason said, sharper than he intended. Sarah's eyes narrowed. If you're not happy here, you can leave. I'm sure a lot of people have. She stared at him for a long second, then walked away. Brenda didn't say anything until they finished the room. You shouldn't poke her like that, she said quietly. She'll make your life hell. Mason didn't respond. He was already planning something. The next day, a guest in room 119 flagged Mason down while he was hauling a trash bag. Hey man, that girl who cleaned my room yesterday? The one limping? She okay? She's managing, Mason said carefully. She shouldn't be working. I asked her if she needed help. She just smiled and said she was fine. That's messed up. Mason nodded. Thanks for telling me. He went straight to the back office during his break, the one Sarah used when she wasn't circling the halls. She wasn't there. He opened her desk drawer, found the employee schedule logbook, and took a photo of Brenda's assignments over the past 6 weeks. Her name showed up 6 days a week. 12-hour shifts. No alternating weekends. No rotation out of the heavy load wings. He snapped the book shut and left without touching anything else. That evening, Mason met with Tasha and Hector behind the laundry room once the shift ended. I need to ask you both something, he said. If you could change one thing about this job, anything, what would it be? Tasha didn't hesitate. A supervisor who respects people. Hector nodded. Same. Would you be willing to share what you've seen with someone from outside? Not HR. Someone who can actually do something. Tasha hesitated. Who are you? Mason swallowed. Let's just say I'm in a position to make change. But I need truth. Not rumors. Actual accounts. Written or recorded. I'll protect your names. They exchanged a look. Tasha said, if you can promise that, then yeah. I'll talk. By the time he left that night, Mason had everything he needed. The following morning, he walked into the staff meeting room at 7 a.m., dressed in the same khakis and work polo as every other cleaner. Sarah stood near the front, clipboard in hand. All right, assignments are up. No complaints. If you've got issues, keep them to yourself. Actually, Mason interrupted, stepping forward. We need to talk. She blinked. Excuse me. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out his actual ID badge, the one with his name, title, and company logo. My name is Mason Vellaro. I'm the CEO of this company, and I've spent the last week watching you abuse your staff. The room went silent. Sarah's face drained of color. You refused breaks, ignored injuries, and created a toxic, hostile environment. You're done here. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. She opened her mouth, but he cut her off. I've already spoken to legal. I've reviewed the complaints. You're lucky we don't pursue further action. He turned to the rest of the room. To everyone else, I'm sorry. This should have never been allowed. Starting today, we're restructuring leadership, reviewing all schedules, and ensuring that no one works without proper breaks or support. He looked at Brenda. You're getting paid medical leave until you can walk without pain. Fully covered. No exceptions. Then to Hector. Your HR complaint should have been handled. It will be. Personally. And finally to Tasha. You've shown more professionalism than some of the people running this place. I want to talk to you about a new role. No one applauded. No one cheered. They just stood there, stunned not because they'd seen justice, but because they'd never thought it would come. Mason walked out of the room without waiting for questions. There was still more to fix. But now he wasn't undercover. He was in charge. 2 days after the reveal, the resort felt colder not because of the weather, but because everyone was waiting to see what would actually change. Staff moved cautiously, unsure if they were really safe to speak up. Sarah's office door was sealed with a printed notice taped to the glass window. Vacated. Do not enter. Her name had been scraped off the whiteboard, but no one had filled her position yet. Mason didn't rush it. He knew that plugging a leadership hole with the wrong person would only make things worse. He also knew that one firing didn't fix a cracked culture. He'd return to his executive role publicly, but he wasn't leaving Clearwater Bay just yet. He rented a small suite on the 3rd floor, not the penthouse, and kept wearing the same uniform he'd worn during his undercover week. No one called him Sir. Most still called him Jay. On Friday morning, he met with the front desk staff for the first time. They'd been left out of the previous meetings, but their department had its own fractures. Why are we short 3 people every weekend? Mason asked, standing beside the front desk manager, a tightly wound man named Colin. Colin adjusted his tie without looking at him. Turnover. People don't want to work Saturdays. Why? It gets chaotic. Check-ins, complaints, overbookings. Guests get restless by noon and we're always understaffed. Mason leaned in slightly. You're telling me you know Saturdays are a mess, and you still schedule fewer people? I work with what I have. Colin's tone was clipped, defensive. We pull from the part-time pool. You mean the part-time pool that's down to 2 people? Colin looked away. It's hard to keep them around. Mason nodded slowly. You speak to them before they quit? Colin hesitated. Sometimes. He didn't believe him. After the meeting, Mason asked to see the last 3 exit interviews. None had been completed. One employee had left a handwritten note saying, "Don't want to be yelled at anymore. Can't take it." He folded the paper and slid it into his pocket. That afternoon, in the break room, he found Tasha restocking the vending machine tray, something not even remotely in her job description. You doing maintenance work now? He asked, raising an eyebrow. She looked up, surprised. Colin asked me to help since the guy from facilities is out. Said it wouldn't take long. Did he ask or tell you? She paused. He said it was a quick favor. Next time, just send him to me. She dropped the bag of chips she was holding. Wait, are you serious? Dead serious. You're not on call for 3 departments. You're paid to clean rooms, not restock snacks. She nodded slowly, still holding the bag. It's just always been like this. People ask for stuff, and if you say no, they stop giving you good shifts. Not anymore, Mason said. You report that to me directly next time. She gave a small nod. Okay. At 4, he met with the resort's acting general manager, a man named Neil who had been running the place on autopilot for the last year. Neil greeted him with forced cheer. Good to see you again, Mason. You've been busy. Mason didn't sit. Why didn't you report Sarah's behavior to corporate? Neil sighed. I saw some of it, sure, but it wasn't my floor. I trusted her team to escalate things if they got serious. 3 people quit in 2 months. One of them was a single mom who walked off the job mid-shift. That's serious. Neil shifted uncomfortably. I figured HR was handling it. Mason shook his head. You're the general manager. Your job isn't to figure, it's to know. You had every tool to intervene and didn't. Neil's smile vanished. Are you saying I'm being replaced? No, but you are being reassigned. Temporarily. You're going to work under the new operations lead, whoever that ends up being. Title stays the same, but your responsibilities shift. You're going to learn what it looks like to be involved. Neil opened his mouth, but Mason raised a finger. This isn't punishment. This is course correction. If you can't handle it, I'll find someone who can. Neil nodded stiffly. Understood. Good. I want daily reports starting Monday. And I want them handwritten. He left the office without waiting for confirmation. That evening, Mason walked the second floor with a clipboard. Not to inspect, but to listen. He met a housekeeper named Daria who'd only been on staff for 3 weeks. I like the team, she said. But no one explained where to put the biohazard bags. I just guess and hope no one yells. Who trained you? Brenda showed me the ropes. But she was limping that day, so we didn't get far. Mason made a note. Anyone else offer to help? One girl in laundry, but she said she wasn't allowed to leave her station. He nodded. You're doing okay so far? I mean, yeah. But it's tense. Everyone's nervous. Like, waiting for something bad to happen. He looked her in the eye. Would you stay if things changed? She hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I like the work. I just want to know the rules. You'll know them soon. On Saturday, Mason held his first staff-wide meeting. No suits, no podium, just him, standing at the front of the conference room with a whiteboard and a dry erase marker. Let's talk about what's broken, he said. No one spoke at first. Then Hector raised his hand. The schedules. They don't make sense. Some people work 6 straight days. Others disappear for 2 weeks. Mason wrote schedules on the board. Tasha spoke next. The supply carts are missing half the stuff we need. We end up borrowing from other floors. Supplies, Mason added. Then Brenda's voice, from the back. We don't have anyone to talk to when something's wrong. HR's in another city. Neil's door's always shut. He added a third line. No support chain. Hands started rising faster after that. Someone mentioned the linen orders being late. Another said guests had been complaining about water pressure for months. One even mentioned the staff bathroom sinks being broken for over a week. Mason let them talk for over 40 minutes. He wrote down every issue in full view. No one interrupted. No one was dismissed. When it quieted, he turned around. This is what happens when leaders stop listening. This is what happens when problems are treated like noise instead of signals. He let the silence settle. Starting today, the following things are changing, he said. First, we're hiring a full-time employee advocate. Someone who's here on site, whose only job is to listen and solve internal issues. Second, scheduling is being restructured. No more than 5 days in a row unless you request it. Third, every new hire gets a full 2-day training led by someone who's been here longer than 6 months. Paid. He looked around the room. I'm not promising miracles, but I am promising accountability. And if any of you see something wrong, you come straight to me or the advocate. No detours. A hand rose from the back. It was Daria. What if someone tells us not to report something? Like, tries to intimidate us? Mason didn't hesitate. You report that too. And I promise anyone caught threatening or silencing another staff member will be removed on the spot. Heads nodded. People looked at each other, not with fear, but with something closer to trust. After the meeting, as the crowd dispersed, Brenda walked up. You're really doing it, she said quietly. Doing what? Not just talking. Fixing. Mason looked at her wrapped ankle. We don't fix people, but we can fix the system that breaks them. She gave a slow, tired smile. That's a start. Behind them, someone laughed for the first time all week. It wasn't much, but it was movement. By the middle of the second week, the shock had worn off. The staff had adjusted to the idea that Jay was actually Mason Vellaro. They still didn't quite know what to make of it, but they started approaching him more openly. Not with small talk, no one had time for that, but with problems, suggestions, and once, a quiet thank you slipped between shifts. Mason didn't want applause. He wanted consistency, and that meant fixing what couldn't be seen on a clipboard or measured in a quarterly report. He arrived early Monday morning, before sunrise, stepping into the operations office with a folder under one arm. A new hire orientation was scheduled to begin that day, 2 maintenance workers and a front desk assistant. For the first time in over a year, it would be done in person, not via a 30-minute video loop. He handed the folder to the new employee advocate, Dana, a sharp-eyed woman with a background in hospitality mediation. These are the revised onboarding packets. Include the grievance protocol and the training rotation schedule. Each new hire gets paired with a senior employee they don't report to directly. Dana flipped through the pages. You're building something sustainable here. You know that. Trying to, Mason replied. Now we just need to make sure people protect it. He stepped out into the hallway just as Neil approached, clipboard in hand, looking less polished than usual. His tie was uneven, and there were faint streaks of cleaning solution on his shirt cuff. Spent the morning with the laundry team, Neil said. They're short 2 staff. One of the dryers has been cycling cold for a week. I already called in the repair order. Mason nodded once. Good. Keep rotating through departments. I want your report by Friday. Focus on workflow, not just issues. Neil hesitated. I spoke with Colin this morning. He's not happy about the scheduling changes. He doesn't have to be. He just has to follow them. Neil shifted his weight. He says it's too rigid. Not flexible enough to cover the weekend rush. Mason narrowed his eyes. Tell him to meet me in the conference room in 15 minutes. And bring the last 4 weekend shift rosters. Neil was already turning to go. Will do. 15 minutes later, Colin walked in, noticeably tense, a thin folder tucked under his arm. He didn't sit. I've been doing this for 7 years, he began. I've never had to run my schedule through corporate like this. You're not running it through corporate, Mason said calmly. You're answering for inconsistent staffing patterns that have directly contributed to burnout and turnover. Colin placed the folder on the table. We've always staffed light on Saturdays. It's the only way to stretch coverage through Sunday without paying overtime. Mason opened the folder. You had 3 people working the desk last Saturday. The resort was at 94% capacity. You had 98 check-ins. We managed. No, your team managed. By skipping breaks and absorbing the pressure you created. Colin's jaw tightened. I'm not the enemy here. Then stop acting like one, Mason said. You're not being fired, Colin, but you are being removed from scheduling. Effective immediately. Colin blinked. What? You'll oversee training for now. You're clearly experienced, but your decisions are not aligned with how we're moving forward. Dana will handle schedules. Colin looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Mason's expression made him stop. He left without another word. By Thursday, the impact began to show. The weekend roster was published early, with evenly distributed shifts and built-in coverage buffers. For the first time in months, Brenda wasn't scheduled 6 days in a row. She noticed. Did you see this? She asked Hector by the vending machines. I actually get Sunday off. Maybe the world's ending, Hector said dryly, folding a towel with practiced precision. Mason passed by just in time to hear it and gave a short nod. Just fixing the calendar. No apocalypse necessary. Brenda called after him. I already made plans. Don't take it back. I wouldn't dare. That afternoon, Mason toured the southern wing with Daria. She'd been paired with one of the new hires for training and had taken it seriously. "This room's been a problem," she said, unlocking one of the guest suites. "The AC unit leaks. I've reported it twice. Why isn't it blocked off?" Colin said we couldn't afford the vacancy. Mason knelt, checked beneath the unit. The carpet was damp to the touch. "We're shutting it down. Today. Mark it unavailable." Daria nodded. "Do you want me to walk the rest of the floor?" "You're not a supervisor." She hesitated. "I know, but you will be, starting next month. We're creating new floor lead positions. 1 per wing. You'll be the first." Daria stared at him. "I've only been here a few weeks. You've already reported more maintenance issues than your last 2 floor leads combined. That's not about time, it's about awareness." She blinked, then whispered, "Okay." Friday afternoon brought a final challenge. Mason was reviewing expense reports when Dana knocked. "We've got a problem," she said. "It's about one of the new hires. Front desk assistant. Name's Jordan." Mason set the papers down. "What happened?" "He told me Colin warned him not to act too familiar with certain guests. Said it would make people uncomfortable." Mason's expression darkened. "What does that mean?" "Jordan's gay. Colin made a comment about tone and posture implied he should tone it down." "Is it documented?" "I recorded the conversation. Jordan gave me permission." Mason stood. "Bring him in." "Now." 10 minutes later, Jordan sat in the conference room, eyes wary but composed. Dana sat beside him, her notepad open. "You're not in trouble," Mason said. "I just need to hear your version." Jordan nodded. "He called me into his office. Said I was too flashy for the front desk. That guests might not feel at ease." "Did he mention your performance?" "No. Just how I present myself." Mason turned to Dana. "Play the recording." She tapped her tablet. Colin's voice filled the room, unmistakable and clear. "Not saying you're doing anything wrong, Jordan, just maybe dial it back a bit. You know how some guests are. We want to keep things traditional." Mason didn't wait to hear more. He stood and looked at Jordan. "You're staying here. You're not adjusting anything. We hired you to be competent, not to conform to someone else's comfort zone." He turned to Dana. "Have Colin meet me in his office. Now." 15 minutes later, Colin was no longer employed at the resort. Mason didn't make a speech. He didn't need to. He sent out a single memo to the entire staff. "Discrimination of any kind will result in immediate dismissal. This is not negotiable." That weekend, for the first time in months, check-ins ran smoothly. The front desk was fully staffed. Brenda took Sunday off and spent it with her son at the park. Hector worked a half shift, then trained a new hire on proper linen folding. Daria walked her wing with a clipboard, logging each room's needs with quiet efficiency. Mason sat in the back office Sunday evening, reviewing the week's reports. Dana entered with a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Letter from Tasha. She said you'd understand." He opened it. The note inside was short. "I stayed because someone finally noticed. Thank you, T." He folded it once, tucked it into his jacket pocket, and leaned back in his chair. The resort wasn't perfect. It wouldn't be next week either. But it was honest now, accountable, human, and that was enough to build on.